Victoria, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. We're talking about building an APJ growth strategy.
Mm.
And the first question I want to ask is, why is building a growth strategy for APJ fundamentally different than some of the other regions like North America and EMEA?
I'll say to start off with, I've been doing it for 15 years and I still don't know nearly enough to really answer your question. So it's a lot to know. I think that there's two parts of it. There is a why and a how. I think that a lot of the largest corporates globally are pushing into APAC right now for lots of good reasons, and that's because the growth is all here. A lot of the ambition is here. You're seeing US, UK, Canada, Australia to some degree, Germany, France max out in a lot of these companies. So they're really looking to APAC to grow and to grow fast. Lots of mistakes, lots of trial and error in that process. But I think that the how is crucial. So why is it different to be a player in some of these markets versus Australia, for instance, which is pretty straightforward and very like the US and UK?
Mm-hmm.
One is obvious. So if you speak a different language and if you have a different way of doing business, then you're going to have to learn how to do that. So if you don't speak Japanese, you don't speak Korean, it's not going to work for you. So there's some really obvious ones that you can name off the top of your head. I think the really interesting thing is, and the more that I learn about it, is there's a deeper level of diversity for the biggest countries in APAC that we never think about. So if you are in Japan, it's not just about having a different language, it's also a different skill set. It's also a way of showing respect to your client and understanding who they are. And it's much slower than it is elsewhere. So that trust component is really high. So it's diverse just in the way people do business. It's also really diverse in the marketplaces and the companies that are active in these geographies. So if you think of China, there's a huge growth in e-commerce businesses, something we do a whole lot with, and they behave really differently. They're very interested in going global fast. If you look at Korea, there's a huge growth in software and services, so AI. So there's an industry component to how you operate there too that really is quite different. And then there's just the people component of it. So you have to know about the timing of the year. So if you are in the Middle East, when is Eid? One of the flaws we've had in Thomson Reuters where I work right now is that, we do our sales targets, we do our planning, we do our numbers, and we wonder sometimes why they vary year on year. And the reason is because most people are on holiday at that time, and we were very silly to have the numbers in the wrong the wrong period, the wrong year. So there's definitely a cadence to way business runs in these places too. And then I think that the last piece would be the messaging. So if you are a client, particularly a large client, and you care about software, you care about growth, you care about innovation, you might care about that because the government is mandating that you care about it. Or you could have a really large younger generation in that country and it's moving really fast. AI is a big thing. So what's driving innovation also really varies in the marketplace as well. And it's not something that's discussed enough, I think. So lots of moving parts and components. We're really lucky in Thomson Reuters in that we have many multiple products, but they work in such a different way depending on where you're based in the world that it's a completely different story. So telling the story of all of that together is what's the hardest part.
So that's really interesting. And I think it's interesting from your perspective because from the previous conversations that we had, your APJ remit is larger than some of the other people. Like it's
Mm.
really APJ, meaning you have China, you have Middle East. Some companies say they do APJ, but really they all operate in one or two of the countries. Why is that? Why is that problematic?
Yeah, look, that's really common. And it's particularly if you're hiring, that comes up again and again. So you'll have a candidate come through and they'll say, I've done APAC and I know all about it. And they don't. And the reason is they do Australia, they do Singapore, which are the easy marketplaces to get to. And they don't do the harder ones where, the very localized, very business driven environments where the growth is. So China, Japan, Korea, they're not thinking of those marketplaces. They're not thinking of India or UAE, Saudi, the ones that you really play in. And those are the harder ones. I think we always refer to Singapore as the gateway market, right? So it's the easiest market to get to in APAC. And that's why a lot of the big corporates who are, I say in air quotes, APAC, are in Singapore, but they're not elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's super common and it makes it hard to hire, right? Someone who is active in Singapore and Australia, let's say, for instance, New Zealand too, they don't really know how to get to marketplaces in your Korea or some of the other marketplaces. ASEAN is getting bigger, and I think a lot of the global corporates are also pushing into Vietnam and Malaysia and a number of other countries that we didn't used to think of in that remit. And they all have their nuance and they all have their great potential. But I think right now is a tipping point for a lot of that. So if you can crack those marketplaces and do it well, you're set up for growth. So a lot of the large global corporates who are thinking about pushing into APAC and may have a little bit of business here now, they can do the Singapores and they can do the Australias, but 5 years from now, they're tapped out. So what happens next?
Yeah.
And I think what you'll find is a lot of those large companies are not ready to do the other marketplaces and their growth will just stop. So, and actually in the interim, you're gonna have a lot of really fast growth startups in Asia that will take their place and be much harder to unseat than they are right now. So how are the biggest companies, and I can think we do business with many of them, how are they thinking about not just what's in front of their nose now? What's about tomorrow? What about the year after? What about the next 5 years? How are we seeding the marketplace? Because I tell you that Asian clients are exceptionally technologically driven. So, and they're ambitious and they're going really hard. So, I think Singapore and Australia doesn't really cut it. You've got to get smarter. You've got to go deeper, and there's a great deal of potential there if you know how to do that.
Can you tell us what actually is under your remit?
So my team look after the world minus the Americas and Europe. So we look after from, if you can do it,
Africa as well.
Africa as well, Africa, Russia, Middle East, round to Japan and New Zealand on a globe. So
Okay.
enormous remit, right?
Okay. Let's park Africa, right? Because I think that that might not be as relevant for our audience. Maybe let's just three lines, right? Middle East, Japan, and
Yeah.
New Zealand. That probably covers the most of it. What are some of the geographies most recently become more important for you and the team? What are the ones that maybe 12 months ago became more important?
I've been in my current role for 10 years, and I say there's been a lot of movement in those 10 years of where we focus on, right? So I think very recently, Southeast Asia, if you hear a lot of the great economic commentators talk about Southeast Asia going really fast, have a lot of new corporate growth, both local and global.
Which country is there?
ASEAN, basically. So Singapore is your hub.
Yeah.
So, but your Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, they're all beginning to play much more in the global space than they used to, and we feel like there's a great deal of potential there. I also think that Japan, for us, huge growth marketplace, really well established and sophisticated audience, really interesting. A big push we're doing in Japan, Korea to some extent because Korea is. Very global in its focus. And then UAE, so United Arab Emirates is where we're focused as well, with a little bit of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is doing some really interesting stuff at a government level on AI. So
Mm.
quite a broad remit. But the thing that pulls all those countries together is their growth, their ambition, and their global focus. So a company that wants to do business with other geographies, with other countries, that's pushing out, that's highly growth focused, is what unifies all those countries together. And they want different things from us, but that's the unifying theme.
One of the things that I'm hearing more and more about from a lot of people that kind of covered the APJ region is India. And not to say that a lot of these companies did not have a presence in India, but in the past maybe 6 months or 9 months, I'm hearing the name India
Mhm.
come up more often than it used to. Before it was like, hey, India falls under our remit. And now I'm hearing more India is a core focus for us. Where
Mhm.
how does that look like from your perspective?
I think I'll have a different answer in 12 months' time for India. Like to say that right now. So I think a lot of the focus in India is about workforce and staff. So we have an enormous staff in India who are very strong in what they do.
Mm.
So we've built up that staff. There's an army of people based in India. And we've also done a little bit of business with big corporates in India. But the reason why India is harder than some of the other marketplaces is how diverse it is. It is the subcontinent. So I have looked after in previous lives medical and healthcare for India. Now with law, legal regulation for India, there are hundreds of universities and there are hundreds of sub jurisdictions. And if you don't get them all right, it makes India really hard to do business there. However, there's a huge population, and that population is hungry for more ambitious, very tech focused, very globally focused, both in terms of emigrating to different places and then also upskilling their own population. So it's got a lot of things that are exciting for global corporates, but it also has things that are a barrier.
Really hard, yeah.
And that's one of the things I think that is in the way of doing more business in APAC is I think a lot of North American or European countries, kind of companies, they think about, okay, I'm going to take my product and I'm going to sell it to you in India, or I'm going to sell it to you in Singapore. It's not the same thing. So your product doesn't customize to that audience. So what you see quite a lot of is trying and failing. So I'm going to try a little bit of stuff. It's a bit half-hearted. I'll push in. I'll see if I can get some sales, some easy wins. Can get a whole lot of growth, back away.
Why do you think it fails?
The investment and resourcing doesn't follow the ambition, right? So you have to commit to a period of time. So you can't do it in 5 minutes. So you can't take a US, UK product, let's say, and just drop it into India. You've got to make sure that really works for the marketplace. So there's a product aspect to that.
What would you say is a realist, and I know it depends, but what would you say is a realistic timeline to start to see fruits of your
Oh,
labor?
good. So I think the fastest you would see is 6 months for some of
That's
the
pretty
the e-
quick.
the
That's
easier the
yeah.
easier geographies where it's English speaking. If you're a big global corporate, if you're an Australian corporate, for instance, pushing into Singapore, you could get results in 6 months. For the bigger marketplaces like Japan, 24 months, 2 years
Mm,
to really see the return on investment, and that's not just getting a product that works, that's also building trust and brand in those countries. If you don't have trust and brand in Japan or UAE,
you're
no
done.
one's buying from
Yeah.
you.
No one looks
Forget
at you.
about it. You're leave, pack up, get lost. They're not interested. So I think there is that comes down to how we do business as well, and the lack of the future focused insight, foresight of some companies I've seen try to push into these marketplaces.
The other question that I had was, what are the most common mistakes people
Oh,
make with expanding APJ? And I think we've already got into that question.
there are so many.
Yeah,
We could
give
talk a
me a
lot
couple
about
more.
it. We
Give me
could
a
talk a
couple
lot
more.
about it. So I love a list, right? So there are a couple of myths that people have, and one which will frustrate any listeners from APAC is APAC is less sophisticated than other geographies. If you're sitting in Korea, if you're sitting in any of the countries in the remit, you will have heard that. You know what I mean. If you are a US based company, or if you're a European company, you're pushing into APAC, or if you're Australian, actually, this is really true. You will hear a whole lot of conversation that's about you're not ready for this. So you might be ready for this in a little while. You're not ready for it now. APAC companies are so much more sophisticated. They're the most sophisticated geographies in the world when it comes to technology. They really are sophisticated beyond, I think, Europe, US marketplaces.
Interesting.
What we mean when we say that is you're either not ready for the product that we have. So, there's a little bit of talking down to clients
Yeah.
in those geographies. You're not ready for the product we have, which means we've not invested enough in you and to understand the client in that marketplace to really get the product working for you, or it means we don't understand you. So
Mm.
we're not really sure how to do business with you. So it's easier for us to say you're not ready yet, when in fact these are the most sophisticated countries in many senses in the world, and they are ready for technology, and they will adopt it much faster than you'll see elsewhere in the world. So the level of sophistication is really high in APAC. That's 100% proven, I think, in my experience.
Can you share any examples here? Like things that I hear on this topic is like the immediate thing that I can think of is, for example, the banking sector, where somebody might come and say the financial sector, be like, well, they're not as regulated and therefore they don't have these requirements. Therefore, they don't purchase these kind of products or our product. That's the thing that I can think of The other comment that I can think of is, oh, our sales function, like the Australian sales function is a lot more mature than
Mm.
our sales function in X country, as some Southeast Asian country. And those are some of the examples that I can think of that I've heard people say. But can you think of an example where
Mm.
that is not true? Like where you've seen these guys are way ahead.
There's a speed of adoption ingredient, right? So there may be components that are true. So is this sales force that's out there skilled enough in solution selling? So it's hard to hire. So people don't really have the skill sets that you're looking for that you might find like-minded in Australia, for instance. That's true. However, they are going much faster than we give
Mhm.
them credit for. When it comes to upskilling their workforce, when it comes to government regulations, so you mentioned the banking finance sector, they will regulate and they'll have startups that do that job for them 10 times better than the things we're trying to sell to them now. So you can back off and you can say, yeah, that doesn't work so far. But if you do, then someone else is going to take it and do it much better than you. So very innovative and very entrepreneurial. So if you're not pushing now and you're not leading the way, then you're going to lose it for the future. That's what I would say. So I think also the end users are sophisticated. So one of the things you see in APAC buying groups really commonly in research is more people in the buying group than any other part of the world.
Mm.
And I think I've seen interpretations of that that say, well, they can't make a decision. So you just had more and more people because they're not sure what they're asking. I don't think that's true. I think that the companies who operate in some of these geographies are more sophisticated in that they know the questions they're asking for. They're asking the right kind of questions. They're getting the right kind of skill sets on board now to evaluate the offerings. And they're going to do a better job at rolling them out than other parts of the world. So you snooze, you lose, right? If you're not doing it now and not grabbing the end user who is very sophisticated, then you've lost already for APAC, in my view. But a couple of the other myths, if I
Yes,
can
let's do
say,
it. Yeah, yeah,
so
let's do it.
sophistication is one of them. I think the other component is, and I hear my team say this all the time, is only face to face works here.
Oh,
So
yes,
all the
classic.
time. But that doesn't work for Turia. It's got to be face to face here. That's how things are done in my name a country.
Give
Kind of
me
everywhere.
country names.
Yeah, so that's how it works in the Middle East is we've got to
Mm.
be face to face. That's how it works in Singapore. You've got to be face to face. You can do that in Australia, but you can't do it here. That's false. So face to face is required for any deal over 50K anywhere. So you need to be face to face in Australia. In fact, we pay more money for events, more part of our budget goes to events in Australia than any other part of the geography. But I hear all the time you can just sell digitally in Australia. Not true. I think the size and complexity, depending on what you're selling, that's the rule of thumb. So you must have face to face in marketplaces where you've got a big deal or a complex deal. It will not work anywhere. Yes, there is more relationship. So you've got to be friends with whoever you're selling to in some geographies, but that's not the same thing as always requiring face to face. The other thing that always you see in APAC buyers is they are online and they are researching you and they are looking every bit of information you've ever put out there and they've read it. So I forget the stat on this. I think it's like 70% of the buying journey in APAC is before they've spoken to you.
Mm.
So if you've not focused on digital, if you don't have an omni-channel strategy, if you don't have a good content program, you've lost. That they've already ruled you out. You don't even know it. So that's half the problem, right? Is like the myth of I don't buy online in APAC. I just don't buy, and that's increasingly true. So as the buyer group gets bigger, it'll get true.
Do you find that the APAC market is more risk averse than, for example,
Mm,
the North American market, where there's a more openness to testing things that are not proven, that don't have a lot of big logos behind
mm.
it, versus here where it's like I want it to be more proven. I want it to I want to see the logos. I want to see you every not every I'm exaggerating, but I want to see you everywhere from a digital perspective at events and so on and so forth.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yes and no. So I think if you look at China, if you look at Japan, if you look at some parts of the Middle East, they definitely are more cautious in their buying cycle and
Mm.
they do want that verification. So they want to have heard X, Y, and Z brand have already used you and they're going to pick up the phone and call them and see what they have to say about your brand. And if it's good, then you're on board. And if they have bad things to say, then you're out the door. So I do think that that's definitely true in risk averse. I would reframe it slightly in saying they know what they want a little better. So some geographies are a little bit like that. So they really know what they want and they're very cautious in how they ask for that. I would say though that there's a lot of experimentation in Asia, particularly smaller businesses. So SME style, smaller accounts, they will experiment, they will try things and they'll try them very fast. What's more you can say as well is they will invest the time to really know the product.
Got it.
So they will
Got it.
invest that time to know the product. When it gets to a bigger deal, again, it's usually a partner play. So we have a lot of partners that we operate with, and you know
Mm.
the big four are part of that. A lot of big technology companies we partner with, and yes, you've got to work with them because the
There's
rollout can be really
certain accounts
complex.
you
You,
just
you,
won't
you
get
just
in
have to. You
other
just
than
have to.
through the
But
GSIs.
I
Yeah.
don't know that I would say that's more risk averse. I think it's cautious
Mm.
but still ambitious, I would say. So we have a much higher growth rate and adoption in outside of Australia, for instance, than we have anywhere else.
Interesting.
We have a huge growth number in Japan. And instinctually, you'd say Japan is a cautious marketplace, right? And they are to some degree, but they're also adopting technology much faster than some traditional countries that you would imagine. So yes and no. The last myth is it's cheaper to run an APAC than it is any other geography. Not true. So I think that the way media works, the way messaging works, the way how you do media buying is really similar now compared to years gone past. So 5 years ago, it was cheaper to run campaigns in India, and it's not anymore.
Right.
So if you're pushing into APAC, expect bigger budgets than the stipend I think that a lot of companies put towards APAC. So the spending in APAC has got to increase along with that growth.
Interesting. Interesting. And I mean, you always do hear that it's North America, then EMEA, then APAC in
Mm.
terms of the feeding order, if you want to call it. Is that changing in has it already changed or is it changing in
It's
in
changing,
Thomson
yeah.
Reuters?
So not fast enough, but it definitely is changing. So Australia and Japan are expensive, but the other markets are nipping at their heels. So expect to have to invest to get that market share now, and then it's only getting more expensive. So as sophistication rises, as the players, the vendors get more sophisticated, those budgets in India, Singapore, ASEAN, Korea, Middle East, you got to spend more.
Yeah, right. Do you think there is going to be a point where we take over EMEA?
Yes.
How far
I
are
think it's
we,
I
do you
think it's
reckon?
going to be very I think there are countries now that are the same. I've done, kind of campaigns, kind of teams through Europe as well. But it's the same cost in Singapore as you would run a campaign in Germany. There's no savings there. It's the up and coming marketplaces like India, China, all of ASEAN. They're getting close, and they're going to be as expensive as the other parts of the globe very, very quickly.
Do you think the North American slash European companies are the ones who are going to capitalize or reconfigure their budgeting to match that? Or do you think they're going to be left behind and you're going to see the rise of companies that are actually based in the region who are going to be materializing or capturing that demand better because the guys in the US and Europe are too focused on their own market and they kind of miss the boat. What do you think
I
is going to
think it's
happen?
both. So, like, I'm very happy to say I think I'm in a company that's trying to do that, and we're getting faster, and we're learning, and we're adapting to that, so that we're in that zone. But there are a lot of big corporates globally that are going to be left behind. They haven't focused enough on their market share now and getting in the door, and the cost of entry is going to skyrocket in the next 5 years, and that might make it prohibitive, or they might be too late to get that market share. There are a ton of exceptionally good smaller companies that are active in APAC right now that are doing really innovative things. And, how fast can a big corporate turn the ship? It's like turning the Titanic, right? You can't go fast
Mhm.
enough to keep up with them. So it's going to be both, which makes it very interesting to do business in APAC for the next 10 years.
I want to talk about content. You talked about that a little bit from a digital perspective. Tell me a little bit about your approach to content overall, and then maybe after that we'll get into some of the weeds.
Right. So look, I think our content program is the jewel in the crown of how we do business. So I think it's not enough to be a product pusher. We have to lead the way and have the thought leadership to back what we're saying. So what that looks like is bespoke research. So, and that's something that APAC is hungry for because you get a couple of data points here and there, and we can all think of the good reports. But when it comes to real insight into how these companies operate, what the growth planning is for some countries and remits, it's really hard, and not a lot of research has been done on that. So we do bespoke research. So it's a human being who's going to pick up the phone and talk to you, Shane, and ask you questions about your life and the growth strategy for your business. And then we'll pull that together into reporting that gives genuinely unique insights. So I think being genuinely unique in the world of AI is actually exceptionally hard. And all the reports that you'll see that are about the buying habits and the company's growth journey through APAC are increasingly similar. And that's because I don't think people invest the amount of time in actually having conversations with clients. So really digging in the old human way of doing things and then giving insights backwards. So a lot of what we do in my team is about what insights do we have to offer. If we don't have something unique to say, what's the point in doing it to begin with? You've got to have a unique value, a unique insight into a marketplace, a company, an area of ROI for that business before you begin the conversation. That's where everything must start. I do think that when it comes to content, AI is driving a whole lot of speed and success.
Yeah.
So when it comes to thought leadership, we are going much faster than we ever were before, and we are being more unique in those marketplaces, which is wonderful. But a human is involved in every single time. So, and that's the only way to get it right. So we do a lot of human engagement as well as use the AI tools. And then the only thing I'd say on content creation as well, it's not just the thought leadership, it's also asset creation. We talked a little bit how diverse APAC is, hugely diverse, enormous. Probably too diverse to customize everything if it's a human being doing that output. But if you need to run a campaign that's a single product launch into, let's say, 9 countries, and they all have nuance, and in each of those countries there are 10 to 12 people in the buyer group, how will you do that without AI? How will you do that without being smarter and having a real
Very
customized content
difficult.
person?
Yeah.
So I think that's where it's going. Are we customized enough? Not nearly, but we're trying to get there.
Victoria, I wanna take one example of a report that you've created, the process of you gone through creating it. Is there something that comes to mind, any asset that right now that you can think of?
I'll take one that's slightly out of date, but I think it's a good
Okay.
example of a few things.
What is it
So,
called?
so it's our trade report.
Yep.
So, trade through Japan, China, and Korea. So you can imagine global trade in APAC is enormous. Most companies are pushing into different geographies. They're trying to sell things to the US, the Europe, they're pushing into other parts of Asia. So trade is a huge component to not just trade professionals, but CEOs through APAC. So nothing had really existed like that at all before. So we engaged a research arm that could do one-on-one bespoke research.
This is
So
external
this
agency.
is an external
Yeah, got
agency,
it.
mostly based out of India, but around the
Okay.
world. And they do a really interesting thing where they have students, so students who are based in the country who have the right not just language but accent, who will phone up the individuals we are trying to reach and have a conversation with them.
Students in the countries that you're doing the
The
research.
countries
Yeah,
that we're doing
I
the
see.
research,
Okay.
or maybe like they're a student in a uni somewhere else in the world, but they're from that geography,
I
so
see.
they know the nuance, and have them lead interviews with senior staff through the largest corporates in the world. Ask them the right questions, just listen, record that, and then pull that together into a high level report of insight.
How and I wanna unpack this, right? Because I think this is very interesting. How do you incentivize senior, people in companies to give their time? What's the approach there?
They want the insight from their competitors. So if you're having an interview with X and you're also having an interview with Y, who we know there's their competitor, they want to be included in the insight. They don't want to be left out. They don't want you to go to their competitor and tell them all the insight that's been driven. And also, they're human beings. They're really interested in what other people are doing. So there's a level of caution in sharing some of that
Mm,
strategy for sure, but also there's a payoff for them that they get to uh, hear the insight that no one else gets to hear. So often these things are very exclusive and they're not
I see.
mass media.
So this would not be public to everybody else?
Not to its fullest extent. So my team will
Okay.
use snippets of that, so little
I see.
nuggets of gold that we'll share, that we'll use as a little sizzle. But the full presentation of that data is only available to you, client or potential client.
Is it client or people who participate? So the participants are existing clients?
They're both white space and client, yeah,
Okay. Okay.
crucially. And I mean, frankly, if you're a white space and you're on that list, then you're also our target. You're a prospect,
Yeah,
right?
I
And
see.
that's a great door opener to that prospect, right?
And you say that, hey, we're going to put this research together. So
Mhm,
I'm guessing there is a pitch at the beginning where we're doing this research. We're from this company. We're
mhm,
from Thomson Reuters. We're putting this report together. You will have exclusive access if
mhm.
you participate in
Yes.
this activity.
Yes,
Unless
that's
they're client, then yeah, you could
you're
have it.
definitely gonna
But
have it,
yeah,
yeah. So there's definitely that angle, and then there's an ingredient where, depending on the size, there's PR. So we throw a bit of media and PR behind if we are gonna launch that report in a big way, and all of those clients want their name to be in the lights, right? They want to be attached to innovation. They want to be seen as a specialist commentator on their particular area in their field, and it's a personal branding thing, right? So, often when you've got a really, really C-suite individual who genuinely is at the top of their field, there's a portion of their work that they need to dedicate to being externally focused.
I see. Yeah.
So it's a little bit of that personal branding and positioning of their company as well. The added incentive for APAC, to just relate it back to APAC, is not a lot of companies do that. So there's not that many opportunities for a CEO of a particular company to have that level of profile and to show that they're forward thinking and to have that commentary be out there. So we have quite a large following, large voice, and they get to talk to that voice, not just directly, but also to show their board and to show, all those sort of media requirements that they have for their business, that they're ticking the box.
Yeah, I see.
The other thing I would add as well, Shaheen, is that if you have, and we're seeing a lot of this right now, if you have a government level AI requirement, which there is in Saudi Arabia, for instance, you need to show you're doing that. And it's not just a case of, I'm going to buy some kit here, I'm going to buy some software, I'm going to kind of check the box. You also have to show that you're using it, and you have to show that you're a voice, you're a player in
Mm,
that field. So there's a definitely an outward focused voice part that we offer to them, and there's no direct sell. It's a value add for clients. It's a retention play, and for the prospects, it's a long journey. So that might be step one of 25 steps that we have planned for that account, but it's a crucial one.
as we're talking about this, I think about some of the work that we do with Alex as well. Like we do a report on the state of ABM in APAC.
Hmm.
It's hard work. Like
Hmm.
it's hard work to kind of put this together. But I can totally see the value of what you're saying. And there are certain things I've written down that I think just you bring such a unique and interesting perspective on when it comes to kind of creating content. The other question that I had on the content piece is how do you leverage this? So you've created the piece of content, right? You would share it with some, and I'm summarizing, right? So you tell me if this is correct. You share it with some of your clients. You share it with some of the prospects. You feature them, so you make them look good, for the lack of a better word.
Hmm.
Are there any other way that you leverage these kind of reports? You sound like you create some snippets, but yeah, keen to hear how
Yeah,
else you use the leverage the reports.
they are step one in all demand generation as well. So
Mm,
so I think when you think of, let's look at Japan. So Japan's really interesting. Trade is the biggest play we have as a company, Thomson Reuters in Japan. So um, we need to start the conversation. And 2 or 3 years ago, we had no presence in Japan, and you can't start the conversation with, "Will you buy this?"
oh
So
wow, so
we had to
Japan is a very new market for you as well.
It's we Thomson Reuters have been in Japan for over 100 years in theory. So we have Reuters, which is our news business, but we also have much larger professional side of the business, which is software. So the software piece is newer to the marketplace than everything else. So if you are in one of the large corporates of the world and you're I don't know, Hitachi or kind of one of the big Japanese brands, you are trying to sell as much as you possibly can to other geographies in the world.
Mm.
And global trade is increasingly complex. So, how do you do that? I mean, it's mind boggling the amount of data you have to process, the amount of regulation, taxes. I'm certainly not an expert, but I think that there's a lot in that.
Yeah.
So how has that been done in the past? I mean, honestly, spreadsheets. You kind of you're moving from spreadsheets to really sophisticated software that have an ROI impact on the business. So there's a lot of front up costs, but there's also ROI that we can help them demonstrate. But the starting point of the demand gen story for trade is this is why you need it.
Yeah, right.
So that can be here's how other CEOs, CFOs are discussing this. This is the approach they're taking. This is how the government regulation is going to impact you. And this is why you need to think about it. This is why you need to care. Here are some strategies that you want to think about, one of them being technology.
So really as a door opener,
It
right?
really is a door opener.
For the
It is a door opener. So I think the other thing is legal technology, so legal AI. So we're interesting in that we're across lots of geographies, but also we have really small clients all the way up to the biggest clients. So you can buy something from us from a grand, or you can buy something for $1 million. So we have everything in between. For the high volume, low average order value business, a little bit more B2C, to be honest, the SMEs, you need to have really funnel driven campaigns,
yeah,
integrated campaigns. So we do have reports on legal tech, for instance, that are the biggest driver of new contact databases for marketing. So they're where we live and breathe. That's the fuel for the fire for everything else that we do. So maybe you enter our funnel as I'm interested in legal technology, and then we have a plan for you for step 1, 2, 3 to move you along the buyer journey and see that.
got it.
And that's all digital demand. So we have both at play at the same time.
I want to talk a little bit about how the shifting geopolitical landscape. We've talked about China, we've talked about Middle East, we've talked about Russia, which is I would imagine is a whole different kettle of fish. How has that affected how you think about go to market
Hmm.
in these pockets of geography? Because they all fall under your remit.
It's super interesting. And I think I have the luxury of being in a company where what we're selling helps you with that. So, strangely enough, when there is a lot of geopolitical strife, things are moving, the governments are changing, trade policies are shifting. We've seen a lot of that with, the Trump government, etc. Actually, that's an area of opportunity for us.
Mm.
So it's
You're
actually
like,
strange
great.
for
Just
other.
keep putting
We
those
do,
tariffs, take them on,
we do,
put
we
them
do.
on. Just
Well, like I think so clients struggle with that.
yeah,
So if
I
if
can
clients
imagine.
struggling, then you have the opportunity to be the hero in lots of situations. So if it sounds complicated here, I mean, imagine what it's like for one of those clients who's trying to navigate all of this somehow. There are hundreds of shifts in like a legislation that you need to be aware of, and a human being alone will make human error, believe it or not, right? So I think if you're offering solutions in your technology, then you are really well placed when there is a lot of shift in those marketplaces. And saying that, sometimes it stops us doing business.
Give me an example if you
So
can.
China is a great example. So China for us has been so oscillating between more important, less important in our strategy and our growth focus. Huge amount of business done in China, huge amount of interest in technology. You can just imagine how much trade business in Japan and China is there alone. However, there's so many regulations that are stopping us going to market there effectively that it's almost a bit of a kind of seesaw of is it worth the effort? How much do you need to invest to get back? Um, so I think China's got a great deal of potential, but it's almost the barrier's too high
Yeah,
to get to clients in China. Conversely, you look at parts of the Middle East, which have got a lot of regulation coming, where there's a huge appetite for help. So
they're very open to it.
how do we globalize? How do we do this faster? Really interested in how they grow and how they raise the bar on the global stage. So, for instance, we our flagship series, a client event series, is called Synergy globally. We launched it in Australia, Dubai, and Singapore last year. We're doing a Tokyo version of this year, and we've just completed our second Dubai and Australia editions early start of this year.
This is a report.
This is a conference.
Yeah, I
So
see.
this is
Got it.
their
Yeah, yeah.
flagship
This is your flagfish
conference. Yeah,
conference.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the amount of we were inundated with people to come to the Dubai event. So and it's really interesting to see is like one of these yardsticks of are people interested in innovation, and we had to stop registrations in Dubai. You know, you're always
No, that's a
hungry
good
for
problem to have.
they are so hungry for more. So that in itself says to me there's so much more to do. And then Tokyo, we're launching for the first time this year, and we are the first company who's talked about some of these concerns in a big way. So the speaker list for that is government level, really interested, really engaged, very senior. So it's you see these little sort of signals where you're saying
Mm.
there's a great deal of potential there. Whereas we have that event in Australia, and it's more about can we get people through the doors
Yeah.
because there's so many events
Get
in
them on the
Australia,
phone
you
and
know?
start calling and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So getting
send
senior in
gifts.
Australia is harder. They're just bombarded with options
Yeah.
where, you know, there's a greater appetite elsewhere.
You have talked about buyer intent signals and complex buying groups. How do you tailor that in APAC, where just like you said, the buying group is often larger
Mm.
than other places? How do you kind of capture those signals? We've been talking about signals. How do you capture those signals and then curate your approach to it?
Saying it out loud can feel really overwhelming actually because there's so much to do in that respect. So I think how you'd break it down before you get to the tools of the trade and how you do that is personas. So there might be large buying groups, but actually persona behavior is really similar. So if you're a procurement personnel, you know you care about certain things for you for the company you operate in. You want as few vendors as you possibly can manage. You want to keep the cost down. You want to make sure that they are compliant with company policy. ESG is a concern. So procurements, you need to handle that persona. Then you have your C suite who care about, are you going to help me grow and what's my ROI? And that's all they care about, really. A little bit of branding, a little bit of growth. And then you have users who, from a day to day perspective, how are you going to help me? How is my day, how's my life easier by using your software? So there's definitely a people angle to that. How are you helping the people and staff in that particular company operate? So if you break it down into those groups of needs. So that helps you a little bit, right? So you can say, um, if I'm tracking, let's say I'm using ABM software, of which there are many, we use a couple of them. So we use Bombora, we use Sixth Sense, we use a few things. So if I am really focused on warming up my procurement group for a particular audience, I am going to track the searches that procurement professionals are doing, and then I'm going to tailor content that's about encouraging them to take the next step forward, or is showing my team we don't say enough about ESG. So a lot of these companies are requiring us to get to a certain standard, and we have nothing like that. We have no content that proves
Mm.
that. Cybersecurity is the other one that they really care about, by the way. So, do we have the content and are we giving it to them in the way that they want to be served that content? So, I think that's a really interesting way of how we do
So
buyer intent now.
on that front, so are you saying that in the APJ market,
Hmm.
you have a set number of personas and that kind of persona structure applies to different geographies?
Yes.
So therefore that
Hmm.
could be the foundational piece.
Hmm.
Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
That's true. And,
Interesting.
you know, we talk a lot about diversity, but that's what's in common. So, it's easier to start on what's in common. So I say this to my team all the time. So if we are 70% in common and 30% diverse by geography, 70% of your work is done. So it's something I push back on a whole lot of the guys is I can't use anything global. So I hear
Mm,
that a lot, but this market doesn't operate like that. When in fact there is a great deal that isn't common, and we're lucky enough to have a large product marketing function globally,
yeah.
right? Who are the experts? So they could have been lawyers at one point in time, and they're helping us with that messaging. So you can't be everything to everyone. So 70-30 is the rule. So 30% adaptation, customization, and then you're winning.
Mm,
And then if you've done those things, if you've done the persona mapping and you know what you need to say, and you've got your content ready with a bit of nuance for that marketplace, you're halfway there, I think, to doing a campaign that's powerful. I
interesting.
think the only part that follows that is the channels and how they vary, because channels do vary by some geographies. So everything from the platform, the social platform does change, but the people don't change that much.
So I'm going to come to the channel and I'm going to
Mm.
have questions on that front. But what else is common? So persona
Mhm.
is common. Some of the pain points are common. Is there anything else that scales across APJ, at least for you and your team?
So persona scales,
Hmm.
face-to-face ABM scales, and like a lot of the ABM signals. So ABM is really important to our business. We do sell a whole lot of large deals to large corporates, as I mentioned. So we do need account plans, and that works very, very well. And it works everywhere, I think, for Thomson Reuters on a global stage.
Hmm.
So that scales. I think to a degree, product messaging does scale. So this is not the marketing side, but product have worked really hard to unify the experience, and it's still an ongoing journey, but unify the experience of product.
Yeah.
So to make your experience sitting in Singapore the same as your experience sitting in the US. So that's something that they're working really hard on. So a great, the features, the functionality, the product does scale to a great degree, not always, but it does scale to a great degree as well. Then I think other parts, the industries scale. So if you don't have industry and or government relationships in the geography, you can't sell anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's something else we need to do everywhere that we operate. So other than that, I think there's a lot of nuance.
Okay. Let's talk channels.
Hmm.
I want to hear what are some of the most recent channels
Hmm.
in whatever geography that surprised you. What
Oh,
comes to
that
mind?
surprised me, right? I think I touched on it before, and it's how digitally focused you have, particularly in the younger buyers through APAC. So a lot of younger buyers, big buying groups, a lot are 30, 35, and they want to consume information in different ways. So it's a little bit boring from the B2C sort of influencer style strategy, right? So who's saying what and where are they? It could be Instagram, it could be YouTube, it could be kind of the
Mm,
bigger platforms, Naver in Korea. So it does have a bit of variation. WeChat, of course. So where are they saying things? Where are those conversations happening? And are you there? Um, I reckon we're a big corporate, so we're not always there, and I think we're often behind that conversation.
yeah.
We're trying our best to catch up. I think if you're a little startup, you're probably having the right level of conversation, but definitely that influencer sphere is important to us in
Mm,
working with specialists. That's it's really crucial, I think, ongoing. It goes back to the point of being verified and trusted. So we do have a big focus in APAC of verify yourself, tell me why I should trust you. And usually that's client voice. So we have a lot of clients. What do they have to say about us? Speak
are
to
there
them
certain
directly.
geographies that you put more focus of the kind of the influencer marketing than others?
No, I think
Okay.
it's important everywhere actually.
Okay.
Um,
So that scales as well.
that
Okay.
good point.
Okay.
Yes, that scales. Yeah,
Um,
that scales.
but does any channel for any geography comes to mind? And I'll give you an example. Like we were running a program in Germany, and I hadn't run a program in Germany. I've been to Germany a couple of times of all that stuff, but I figured out there's a different LinkedIn in Germany. I can't remember the name of the platform, and probably get roasted in comments. But there's a different platform. Um, we run programs in India, but the first time that we ran programs in India, I realized how effective phone is
Mhm,
compared to everywhere else, and how ineffective email is. The other stuff that even in Singapore or Malaysia, I realized how important a WhatsApp strategy is
mhm, mhm.
compared to other places. So, just curious to know if there's anything of this sort that has come up, and you're like, "Oh, that I didn't know that."
Yeah, well,
Um,
going back to the mistakes part of your questions earlier,
mm,
so there's no point in sending an email, and there's no point in sending anything on LinkedIn or any of the social platforms in China other than WeChat. So
yeah,
you've wasted all of your time in China if it's not on WeChat, right? Even our company website is not viewed as often, I guess, as
wow,
WeChat. So same thing for Naver in Korea. So I think WhatsApps are becoming, to be honest, everywhere. Um, Japan is maybe the one country that doesn't have as much B2B impact on social platforms as you see elsewhere in the world. I'm not sure if that's come to business as much as it is. I can pick any other geography, to be
mm,
honest. So Japan is the one unique aspect where that doesn't work. Email doesn't work anywhere. No one reads email anymore, so I think that's old news. No, to be honest, sometimes I'll hear internal stakeholders say, "Just send an email," and they're not going to read it.
Nobody
So
nobody
there's no
opens
point
that.
in email. So visual video content snippets, snappy, get to the point information on all the main channels. Almost it doesn't matter which channel it is, as long as you are adapting and doing it quickly in enough volume to have your share of voice be heard. To win that share of voice is what's important everywhere.
One of the things that you and I have spoken about is marketing evolving into a business advisory machine.
Mm.
What does that look like in practice? Give me a bit of a background on that.
Well, marketing is made up. It's entirely, we just construct and we say this is marketing and this is sales and this is whatever else it is. So I just don't
That's
believe in
such an
marketing.
existential question. It's
I
like,
really
and
don't.
time is an illusion. And
Yeah, exactly. I do. I really think that. So I think if you're really in your swim lane and that's where you are and you're focused on your channels, your assets, the tactics, 101 marketing campaign, you're not doing your job very effectively and you're not going to be a
Mm,
leader ongoing. So where I try to spend most of my time, if I can help it, is how I help the company grow or how I help clients service their need. So focus on the clients, focus on the growth. And sometimes that means maybe you could call what I'm doing reviewing product. Maybe what you can call what I'm doing sales. Maybe you can call what I'm
mm.
doing, whatever it is, you can call it what you like. But I think we often within marketing get very focused on our swim lane and you know what? That is the biggest problem for getting respect. So, I mean, you've got a lot of marketing things, right, where leaders talk about how do I get sales to listen? And like, why do you care? Why do you care what sales have to say? What you should care about is the business and forget what swim lane you're in, and then everyone is on the same page. So, I think that's a big trap of junior marketers as well. So, a
Can you
lot of
give an
my team,
example of like
yeah.
maybe one example of how you've done that?
So I think I'm going to think of a very recent one, a call I had this week, and it was about how to build stronger relationships with sales and how to prove our performance is good in certain geographies. So this was actually for India, where my team member was saying, "But I've done this and this and this to prove to sales of my worth for this week, for this month." And I said, Why are you so? Why do you care what sales have to say?" Well, if I don't care what sales are saying about me, then they're going to bad talk me in this meeting, or they're going to say marketing performance is not correct, or it's this or it's that. But my point was, you can have them love you, and sales will love you, and you won't meet any targets. So, being the best friend of sales is about being growth focused, coming up with great innovative ideas, working in partnership for them to do it. But it's not just being the end of the conveyor belt to requests, which
Mm,
I think we often get trapped in doing. So, it's a mindset thing. If you are focused on pleasing someone else, sales, product, whoever it may be across the business, I don't think you're doing your job, which is easier to say than it is to get out of that mindset. I think it's an experience thing. It's caring less what people think, a little bit,
I
getting
love
some
it.
experience
Love
under
it.
your belt. But I do think that marketing is particularly prone to being trapped in that mindset of in the swim lane.
Got one last question before we get into rapid fire.
Sure.
What do you think the roles and capabilities and the mindset of marketers? How does it need to change for success in APJ in the next 3 to 5 years? And I'm going to give you a little bit of
Mm.
context of what specifically is on my mind. I'll give a little bit of story. I have a brother. He started studying software engineering, and he's based in Seattle. So, you know, the headquarter of Amazon, Microsoft,
Mm.
Boeing, yada yada yada. A lot of large tech companies, Facebook, Google, all have campuses. And at that point, the 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 potential for hiring a software developer was amazing. You go in, entry $120,000 USD, a salary, da 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 da. Within 2 years, that changed, right? With the introduction of AI, all of a sudden, all those entry roles disappeared
Mm.
and became extremely hard because the Copilot and GitHubs and yada 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 were extremely helpful for more senior developers, right? So that just disappeared. So one of the things that is on my mind is how is that going to change for marketers? I listen to people. A lot of people say, "Oh, you're not going to get replaced by AI. You're going to get replaced by someone who's using AI and all that stuff." And cool. I don't think that's fully true. I think a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. And my question to you is, what do you think? How do you think the marketing org and marketer is going to evolve in the next 3 to 5 years in this region?
In my current role, 10 years, I've done hundreds of interviews, and you see patterns, don't you? And the people who come across. So I think one of the things you've done in the past 5 years to begin with is be very digitally focused, so technology focused. And if you ask someone what interests you about marketing, they'll say, I love digital. I'm very interested in digital. What is digital? It's everything that marketing do these days. So I think the technology is going really fast. So the kind of marketing that you have to do where it's highly technical, they're going to be tools that make it easier and easier and easier.
Mm,
So we for instance, we use Canva, right? We using Canva in a really big way for AI. That's made the design and the content so much faster already that you actually you require fewer skills in marketing to make higher level content than you used to. So I think when technology goes that fast, you have so many wonderful tools. You can analyze the data so fast. What's left? And it goes back to, I think, why I love marketing actually. So, marketing is about people and it's about message and it's understanding why people think and behave the way they do. So, one of the what I'd say is the art of marketing is getting lost in replace of science.
mm,
I think we need to go back to the art. So people who can craft a message, who can understand buying behavior, who focus on the client, the human behind it, that will never go away. And understanding that is the hardest thing that we do. So skill sets where you can craft a message. Strangely, in the world of AI, where you can write something that is powerful, impactful to the heart of the problem of the person, that is going to be a rare skill set. So the more people we have like that, you'll have a job forever because AI is never doing that part for you. It's sort of the old school part of marketing, like why I got into it. So I think we're going to see a complete swing back to the art of marketing more than the science.
okay, let's do some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
First question I have is, what is one resource? This could be a book, a blog, a podcast, whatever it is that you've come across in the past 6 months that you like. This is really cool.
The first thing that comes to mind, Professor Scott Galloway.
Oh
Have
yeah,
you
we
heard of
love Galloway,
him?
the dog.
Oh my god, his content I will lap up. He's so to the point. Love him. Anything he does, be it podcast, whatever it is, I'll read, I'll watch. I love him. He's very human in his approach, actually, like very very to the quick. That wasn't one sentence. I'm
That was
sorry.
great. That was great, though. We love Galloway. We will get
We'll
him
get
on.
him.
We'll get him on the podcast
We'll get him.
eventually. We'll get him on the podcast. What is a resource that has had a fundamental impact on the way you work or live?
I think how I read data. I don't know if that's a resource, but maybe you could say it's a Tableau or whatever reporting tool you're using. So I live in data and I do reporting on my own every single day to understand what we're doing. That's where I get insight, and I've always been that way, and it informs everything that I do.
So is that kind of learning how to use Tableau, or was
Tableau, Power BI, the couple of tools, but the data analytics tools, to summarize, is the biggest thing I've used that
okay?
still impact me to this day.
I love it. I love the practical answer. If you could give one advice to B2B marketers, what would it be?
Get out of your own way. I think we overthink things, and I think we are very focused on I work in marketing and nothing else. So get back to being a growth focused person. Focus on where you're going, the future, and get out of your own way.
Sounds similar. We've talked about this. We've talked about this for Alex a couple times. But I love that advice. And we do that. I do that all the time. And I had to make one value for myself is don't get too cute. Keep it simple. Get to the point. Because I do get cute. And it's like, oh, let's build this around it and all that. But let's not get into that. Last question I have is, what's something that excites you about B2B today?
I think B2B marketing, and generally is leading the way. I think that it's one of these industries that's going faster than many others. And I think the chance to learn and grow and adapt is really quite high. The time we spend shaping the future of some of the marketplaces, particularly in APAC, like we all have a chance to be very future focused. we have a chance to run campaigns, content, messaging that reaches millions of people, like literally millions of people. Forget about the itty bitty campaigns of the past, that we can really make a large impact very fast. So I love that. And, I hope we get to a point where the APAC part of B2B is more the first priority rather than the third priority of the globe, because I think that's where we're going.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I really love that. Finally, we're gonna rise. And
Number one.
yes, and we're not gonna get the bottom of the barrel budgets. But Victoria, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're very
Really enjoyed this chat, and it was great having you.
Thank you for having me.